After sports, that engagement with Joseph King Kong Agbeko, we're back in the studio. And you know, when you see this, and you see me standing right here, that I'm about to share with you my blunt thoughts on a Friday morning. I've titled it today, Galamsey Hypocrites, Environmental Terrorists and Economic Con Artists, Ghana under siege. Galamsey Hypocrites, Environmental Terrorists and Economic Con Artists, Ghana under siege. Ghana for wake up. Wake up and smell the coffee. Growing up, you see, we all were told of deceitful people. Sometimes they were even portrayed as those untrustworthy people who, when they told you to look up, you would rather have to look down because there was no truth in them, like the Bible would say. Today, Ghana for the very people whom we have selected to govern us with our own power, we give them the power, have become pathological liars whose words you cannot even trust for a moment. Well, maybe they had always been that anyway, so there's no change. They had just not shown it. I mean, how else can you rationalize or explain the sickening, not to mention nonsensical forces we are being subjected to on the daily? How? Tell me. But even before I get into the rest of what I have to say, I'm going to be focusing on Galamsey, the environment broadly, and then I'll talk about where we are economically, and then I'll come back. Now, in this first slide, if you look at that Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining, and of course there's been a lot of talk about that in recent times, look at when they started work. March 2017. How many years ago? About 6 years ago. The purpose was to fight illegal mining. It was dissolved in January 2021 after 4 years. The reasons: the Secretariat was hit by an alleged bribery and corruption scandal, which has been the bane of this entire fight against Galamsey, and I must say, of this administration. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when you look at the IMCIM and its composition, you would see that the Ministry for Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, MESTI as we called it, Professor Frimpong Boateng's ministry back then, Lands and Natural Resources, Local Government and Rural Development, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Regional Reorganization and Development, Monitoring and Evaluation, Water and Sanitation, crucial, Interior, Defense, Information, were all on this. Let's go to the next slide. Now, the claims being made, what is fact, what is fiction? I found it a bit interesting when I heard that chief, in Chebi, taking on the good old professor. I get that he may not get everything spot on, but this whole bit about, if you're going to talk about the fact that there's no digging, no Galamsey going on there, fine. But this bit about politics that was being played, and now I think we ought to take on some of these chiefs. Honestly, we should get past that situation. There's a difference between respect and when someone is in error. We have this mind-boggling thing in this part of the world where if an adult is not making sense, we try to cover it and say, oh, are you penny? So you're penny, now we can't say it afrache, and the answer say, we can't. As I see, you come with him. Now, look at his allegations. Officials at the presidency heavily involved in Galamsey. You've seen the Galamsey kingpin list. Major people, and I'm disappointed in some of them because some of them are people I know personally and respect. Some of them were in the media. NPP bigwigs orchestrated his ousting, according to him. Allegations of 500 missing excavators untrue, according to him. Leading NPP officials served as legal counsels for Galamsey suspects. We all know whom he's talking about. And the MP sold illegally acquired concessions at 200,000 Ghana cedis. Yantong, Nianco. After all, we heard it at a point, right? Party Hiesika. Let's go to the next slide. Now, in reacting to that, the opposition NDC has called for a probe into the Galamsey report. And for the NDC themselves, I do not look at them I look at them in a slightly better light because things weren't as bad as they are now. But they can't exempt themselves either. This is a problem that has been with them and remains even now. It's just a worse form that we are seeing now, the hypocrisy of it. The NDC itself, some of your members were pointed to. You're not talking about that. You should talk about that too, because you're also complicit. Now, they called on the special prosecutor to launch a full-scale investigation into the matter with the aim of prosecuting anyone found culpable. And they've called on Parliament to initiate a public inquiry into the Galamsey report. I want to see these happen. And for once, the NDC should be able to stick to its word and push for some of these things until they happen. Next slide. Now look at some reactions. When you look at the president's cousin, he looks nice, doesn't he? Gabi called me on phone to defend a mining company destroying Ghana's vegetation. That's what the report says. He called to defend. Gabi says, weak, Frimpong Boateng twisted my intervention. Oh, sir. And I weigh Brother Bernard. Through Gabi's intervention, arrested Chinese Galamseyers were released by the task force. I don't know. You put the loose ends together and draw your own conclusions. Next slide. Now, if you look at the CNG Alaska's history of abusing mining permits and regulations, and they are one of those prominently cited by Professor Frimpong Boateng, you would see that they had a history. 29th November 2016, Mr. Tony Obin quoted them as engaging in seriously engaged in legal mining. 30th January 2017, around the time, right before the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining started its work, Mr. Tony Obin, Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, says they were undertaking mining activities illegally. 2nd October 2017, Honorable John Peter Amewu, Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, said CNG Alaska does not have a valid mining operating permit and are directed not to carry out any mining operations. So what happened? What happened? And Gabi, I'll leave my comments. Next slide. Now, President Akufo-Addo, in that same year, July 2017, I put my presidency on the line for Galamsey fight. President Akufo-Addo in October 2022, quote, I will deal with government officials found complicit in Galamsey activities. And then, in respect of Al Jazeera's latest investigation, Gold Mafia, from this month. A gold trader exposed in the investigative documentary has alleged that President Akufo-Addo is his friend and lawyer. Of course, we know the presidency has written a missive to Al Jazeera seeking some retraction or apology. I'm not Al Jazeera. I don't work there. I just find it curious that time and again, from Kwesi Nyantakyi till now, from having the president in his pocket to Charles Bissue and what he has said, we always have people pointing to, and not just locals, people pointing to our president, and usually the vice as well, in terms of being complicit in these things. Why? I'm not saying they are guilty, but I'm asking a genuine question as a citizen, not a spectator. Why? Let's go to the next slide. Now, as of 2017, over 200,000 people were engaged in Galamsey, looking at the fight against Galamsey. Nearly 3 million, we're told, rely on Galamsey for their livelihoods. That also points to a failure by administration after administration to deal with the unemployment situation. That is a pointer. Why would they want to risk their lives with cyanide and mercury and all of that? Do you know what that does to the body? They do that because our leaders have failed them. Ghana attracted 50,000 gold seekers from China alone. 50,000. You remember back then when we did the list and how many nationals from other countries were here, from the sub-region and especially outside from China, who were here milking our resources. And now we know, of course, that they are helped, enabled by big wigs in our system. One Galamsey kingpin allegedly employs over 300 Chinese. These migrant workers, together with a number of Ghanaians as well. So this fight, I'll tell you bluntly, Ghana, we are not winning Foko. We are not winning anything. We lie bad. With this, what we are doing here, go and look at the PRA and go and look at the Ankobra and come and tell me we are winning what fight. That's why I got a bit annoyed when recently I heard the lands minister, they are doing everything and waiting. Let's go to the next slide. Implications of Galamsey. Now, more than 19,000 hectares, or about 2% of cocoa plantations, were destroyed by Galamsey operators. And now that situation is even worse. But here's the breakdown. Cocoa output slumped by 34% in the first 6 months of 2022 compared to 2021. That's what they will not tell you. 34%. 34%. Food security is also at risk. Millions of people, as we've been told recently, in Ghana and the Ivory Coast are facing hunger. And that's according to the UN. So you see the double whammy, or triple whammy if you like. Galamsey is polluting our waters, polluting our land, and we're also at risk of hunger. God help us, really. Let's go to the next slide. Now, looking at budgetary allocations for Green Ghana, you would think that, look, we're facing all these problems with Galamsey and reclamation of land, so planting trees would be a good thing, right? It is, but it all depends on how it's done and where the money ends up, the paper trail. And that's my problem here. Let's do a quick analysis. In the year 2022, the budgetary allocation, 9.6 million Ghana cedis. 2023, 2.5 million Ghana cedis. Now, it's interesting that we're allotting another 2.5 million Ghana cedis to do this, because I've always said that we don't have the statistics on how many of these trees have survived. We heard some of them were eaten by goats. With the sums we've pumped in, what has been the value for money analysis, so to speak? How do we know that we're making inroads? The last time I heard Mr. President say about 80-something% the last time had survived. Based on what analysis? Based on what statistics? We deal in the media, like you see me doing. We deal with statistics. And we already have a debt of 28 million Ghana cedis owed those who have provided seedlings to us. We're an economy without money, and we're still expending money on an exercise on which we have no data, really, in terms of how much we're gaining from it. It's like the fight against Galamsey. We keep pumping money in there, and the situation keeps getting worse. Shambolic. Next slide. Now, in terms of Ghana's dwindling international reserves, pay attention, follow me. The gross international reserves, valued at $5.9 billion. The import cover, gross import cover, is 2.6 months. The net international reserve, $2.6 billion, and the import cover net, then, is 1.2 months. According to the IMF projections, and we'll get to the next slide, I'll show you the disparity between the Bank of Ghana's projections and the IMF's projections. The import cover is only 0.6 months, a little over 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Now, that is dangerous. In case you didn't know, having about 3 weeks of import cover is basically bordering on the disastrous. Next slide. Now, if you look at the Bank of Ghana, the output of Ghana's import cover, Bank of Ghana versus the IMF, 2020, they said 4 months. 2021, 4.3. 2022, 2.7. According to the IMF, around that same period, 2.5, 2.4, and now 0.6. That is where we are. Next slide. Now the impact, the real comparative. There are fewer dollars available for imports on the back of that. There's pressure on the cedi, and we're still seeing the cedi bleeding against foreign currencies. Inflation may skyrocket, and we're already seeing it. It may be dipping, but do you really see the difference on the market? It's still there, and it's biting hard. There are more defaults, external defaults expected, and we can expect more downgrades. Again, we're still in the throes, Fitch, among others. And the Eurobond market, obviously, is completely out of reach for now. We dug ourselves into a pit, deep one, and we have to bear the consequences. Next slide. But what does all of this mean comparatively? This is Ghana. Let's look at Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, South Africa, and Zambia. Currently, we like to talk big and compare ourselves. So let's do the analysis, yeah? Their import cover, Zambia, 3.1 months. South Africa, 5.2 months. Big brother South Africa on the continent. Rwanda, 3.7 months. We like to downplay them. You see? You see? Nigeria, 5.7 months. We like to talk, Nigeria, 5.7 months. And Buhari, Tinubu, 5.7 months. What do we have here? Kenya, 3.7 months. Look at this league. Look at us. 0.6 months. 3 weeks of import cover. Nothing to show. If you want to be a braggart, at least have something to show. This administration has been nothing short of blatantly hypocritical in tackling, or should I say failing to tackle Galamsey. It has been criminally negligent with our economy. And yes, I feel we have been conned by shrewd politicians who told us what we wanted to hear in order to attain power, only to borrow left, right, and center with precious little to show for it and leave us in the lurch. This administration, in my books, has been ridiculously disastrous. In fact, atrocious in handling our most urgent affairs. What is it? Corruption? Galamsey? Moving from taxation to production? Infrastructure, whether roads or schools or hospitals? Where exactly has this administration lived up to expectation? Tell me. Every administration is remembered for something. Rawlings, for the end of military rule and being willing to see to the establishment of a proper democratic space, rural electrification, bringing sanity into our system. Kufuor, for the school feeding program, which is now in tatters, the National Health Insurance Scheme, the Metro Mass Transit or Transport System. Atta Mills, for competent moral leadership shown through clamping down on corruption. Improved gross international reserves, the single spine salary structures implementation, domestic financing, the clearing of TOR's debt. I could go on and on. Mahama, the Takoradi port expansion, the Etuabo gas processing plant, the educational e-blocks, the Kwame Nkrumah Circle interchange, among other road infrastructure, health infrastructure, including the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, among others. I ask you, Ghanani, this morning, what will you remember this Akufo-Addo-led administration for, apart from free SHS, that is? I'm not saying they have done nothing. My question rather is, what will you remember this administration for? What exactly? If you look at me, I'm sure everyone would say, oh, Benjamin Akako on the AM show, I remember him for this or that. What would you remember this administration for? The ball is in your court. This period for me has been one of the most difficult in myriad ways. Only God's graciousness has seen me through these turbulent times. How much am I still purchasing fuel for? How about my utilities? How about inflation and the cost of living? Talk of Galamsey and what it's doing to the food and water I end up consuming, and you'd get my drift. This administration has been nothing short of a disaster. I insist on that. We all know it, so let's not even pretend we don't. We all need to act, as I end, to stop this environmental terrorism in terms of Galamsey. Do you know where the food on your plate, the fish in your fridge come from? Do you know what Galamsey has deposited in them? Heavy metals do not degrade. They bioaccumulate, and they are killing us slowly. Galamsey is nothing short of evil. Let us expose all involved in it and pray that God deals with all in power who are turning a blind eye to the menace. And I thank Dr. Ken Ashigbe for some of these words. You have a role to play. I also have to do my bit. Let's say no to Galamsey. These Ghana 4 are my reflections, effusions, if you like, on the hypocrisy of our system and why we still are here. These are my blunt thoughts shared with you, raw, hot, unedited, undiluted. God richly bless Ghana, I keep saying, and make her great and strong.